Every sommelier wine lover should have a champagne saber.
Yes. This is a serious looking dagger.
It's not terribly pointy. It's just a beautiful way to open champagne. There is a trick to it, though. The bottle must be a champagne bottle because it's thick. It must be cold as possible so it's brittle and the champagne doesn't fly out. You've just got to be very safe when you do it. I've never had an accident, but if you go on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, you'll see all sorts of disasters. So if you try it, just be very careful, do a bit of research, and make sure you do it properly.
Yeah, actually, don't try this at home. There is a technique, of course. You have to find the seam of the glass going up the side, and you're looking for the structural weakness in the glass. So you really do have to know what you're doing. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 224. Can you imagine a world where there's only synthetic wine? And what is synthetic wine anyway? And how does removing alcohol impact the tasting experience? You'll hear these tips and stories in part 2 of my chat with Steven Laine, author of the wine mystery novel, Root Cause. You don't need to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but I hope you'll go back if you missed it after you finish this one. Now a quick update on my upcoming memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. So pre-orders can make or break a book launch. These are the orders or purchases that customers make on bookstore websites for a book before its publication day. So why are they so important? Well, I've learned that high pre-order numbers send 3 vital signals. The first is that they tell bricks and mortar bookstores that they should stock the book on their shelves, maybe even display it. And that's critical since the majority of the 2,700 books published every day don't even make it to bookstores. The second is to nudge online retailers to show the book to those browsing in a relevant genre on their website. For example, if someone types in best memoirs into the search bar, your book comes up. And third, it lets the publisher know that they can be confident in printing enough books to satisfy demand rather than being caught out of stock without enough books ready to go on the publication launch day. And while every pre-order is a vote of confidence for a book, the purchase of several copies per person is often the difference between success and failure. Why would you want to buy more than one copy of a book, you ask? Well, I have 7 reasons as they relate to my memoir. So number 1, you can be someone's book angel and give them this book, especially young people entering the workforce or early in their career, or career veterans who face similar issues of sexism and divorce and everything falling in on your head at once. You may not even know who this person is right now, but you'll have a signed book ready to give them. 2, get a signed copy now for Mother's Day or for someone's birthday or holiday. Signed copies may not be available in a few months from now, so get them while you can. 3, give one to a little free library. Those are those little mailboxy looking things of books that you might see in your neighborhood, and they're wonderful ways of spreading the joy of reading. 4, be part of the team that gets this book on the bestseller list to spread its message of hope, justice, and resilience. All pre-orders now count as the first week of sales, and it's that first week of sales that a book has its best chance, sometimes its only chance, of getting onto a bestseller list. 5, buy copies for your book club or your wine group to read together, even if you don't have an official group. There's a book club guide that will guide the discussion and suggest wines. 6, qualify for juicy bonuses. So if you buy 1 to 4 copies, you'll be part of my private book club, which will be an online wine tasting and book reading plus an open Q&A discussion. You'll also get 6 wine and food pairing templates and personally autographed book plates for your books. And 7, if you buy 5 or more copies, you'll get everything I just mentioned. Plus, you'll be in on my writer's workshop to get started on that book you've been thinking about for a while, what it takes to land an agent, and working with a publisher, plus all kinds of other juicy tidbits that I don't share on the podcast or anywhere. You'll also get a wine and food pairing course with me, the lost chapters that didn't make it into the memoir, and exclusive interviews with the main characters in the book and what they're doing now and how they reacted to the memoir. Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much is available for pre-order now from all bookstore websites. Please consider ordering your copies today to send those make-or-break signals to the bookstores and to qualify for those juicy bonuses. You'll find all the info about the bonuses and links to retailers on my website, as well as on the website winewitchonfire.com. Your support for this 10-year labor of love would mean the world to me. Thank you. Here's a review from Lee Romano, an early reader from Durham, North Carolina. Quote, her writing style is wonderfully engaging, as if she's right there with you, sitting on the sofa across from you, sharing the no-holds-barred ups and downs of her life and the secrets of the wine world. Natalie's book will have you feeling all the feelings along with her, and when you're finished, you'll pour another glass to toast to her grit, determination, and her love of all things wine. 5 stars. Thank you, Lee. I've posted a link to a blog post called Diary of a Book Launch in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/224. This is where I share more behind-the-scenes stories about the journey of taking this memoir from idea to publication. If you want a more intimate insider seat beside me on this journey, please let me know you'd like to become an early reader and get a sneak peek at the book before it's published. Email me at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. Okay, on with the show. All right, tell us about your next 2 books. The one that's coming up next for release is Jupiter's Blood.
Yes, so no publication date yet. I'm looking for a new publisher right now. This is a book about synthetic wine. It's got a series of new characters in it. So each book so far has got new characters in it. But the Jupiter's Blood book will have a couple of characters from Dragonvine.
Okay.
And it's all about synthetic wine. And just as we can imagine a world without wine, imagine a world full of fake wine, but not just fake wine, but actually synthetic wine in the sense that it's made in a lab, but it's really properly made. If you look at a wine and break it down to its components, it's water, it's sugar, it's flavanols, it's acids. These are all things that we can measure and we can know and we can reproduce. So technically, there will be a day when we can take a bottle of wine, break it down, and then rebuild it, and it will taste exactly the same. Now, purists will, of course, throw up their arms in disbelief, but it's just science, and wine is as much science as it is art, of course. So the story revolves around that, and again, it's a big what if, so I won't give any more away there.
You asked some big questions.
After that, yeah, well, it's fun because that book really tackles the climate change arguments and both sides of that. It looks at synthetic wines, and again, the story is revolving within that, and it's all about people and relationships too. So it's a lot of fun. It's a trio of main characters this time.
That's great.
So it's a lot of fun having those dynamic.
Yeah.
The book after that, I'm just outlining now, working on now. It's called The Somm. And this one, I can't give too much away about it right now, but it's more like Root Cause. It really travels around the whole world. The main character has COVID, and she's a sommelier, of course, and she has to work on a case, work on an investigation while concealing the fact that she's had COVID and she has long COVID and she's lost her sense of taste and smell.
Oh, wow.
And as a sommelier, of course, you can just imagine what would that do to the sommelier's career if they lost their sense of taste and smell, and how would they work towards gaining that back, and how would they make their way through the industry trying to conceal that. So it's a lot of fun kind of developing that story and that character.
Really great premise again. Wow. Okay. I got my reading list, my TBR list all sorted for 2023. Now, during the pandemic, you mentioned you worked at 2 wineries. Tell us a bit more about what motivated you to do that and why you chose the 2 wineries that you did.
Sure. Well, I think COVID threw everybody for a loop, and some people, really struggled. I know a lot of my friends really struggled. I struggled to begin with, but like anything, one has to pivot and adapt in life. So I resigned my job to do some traveling with my dad in Australia and New Zealand, had a bunch of winery tours lined up and very excited to do that. And then of course, COVID struck. So we'd planned to start traveling April 1st, 2020. Well, that didn't work out. So I ended up back home in Canada and without a job, and getting back in the hotel industry would have been a challenge. So I always wanted to work in a winery, following some visits to wineries in Barossa Valley in Australia, where I learned you could work at a winery for just a harvest. So I started reaching out within Canada, where I could travel still during COVID, and looked at wineries I was familiar with. I always liked Mission Hill. So I reached out to them. They had some positions available, did a Zoom interview, and they said, "You're hired." Great. All I had to do was convince them I could lift 50 pounds and climb stairs.
And what drew you to Mission Hill? Tell us a bit about that winery.
Well, it gave my dad and I the opportunity to drive across Canada, so it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And it was Canada's best winery in 2019, if I recall. And it's got a great reputation abroad. I've worked with them in different hotels around the world. They've got a great selection of wines, and it's a huge winery. So there's opportunity to do a lot of different roles. So I was working on the bottling line. I was working in the cellar. I was driving a forklift, working in the press room. And it was just a wonderful experience. It is hard work, definitely. Working in a winery removes the glamour. You realize it's not such a glamorous industry behind the scenes.
Yes.
You're always wet, you're always cold, or you're always hot, and there's a lot of stairs.
Yes, exactly. And Mission Hill is a beautiful winery to visit. It's
gorgeous.
I don't know if it's a Spanish theme, but they've got a clock bell tower, they've got arches, they've got artwork. It's just...
Yeah, they've got a lot of statues around the vineyards. It's just a beautiful place. Great restaurant, great view over the water, over the valley.
Yeah, looking down on
it really is gorgeous
valley
out there.
And the founder, Anthony Von Mendel, he is also the founder of Mike's Hard Lemonade and I believe White Claw. So there is serious investment in this place. So I think
very much so. Very much so. Yeah.
As wine lovers, we benefit because I think his other businesses are funding this one. And then you chose Trius in Niagara. Why was that?
Well, I wanted to work in another winery. I could have gone back to Mission Hill, but I wanted to get a different experience. So I looked at a few wineries in the Niagara-on-the-Lake area. I'm from Ontario originally, so it was a shorter trip to get out there. So I interviewed for about 4 or 5, and based on my experience with the interviews and the actual winery itself, I chose Trius because I know the area pretty well. And that was a wonderful experience. I was primarily in the barrel room and did some work in the press room as well. A little smaller, more intimate winery, but a great experience. And I was just doing, when you visit a winery and you see those people taking samples and filling barrels and moving barrels with the forklift, that was me. And I got to do that for 3 months. And it was just magical. It was a very humbling experience, making minimum wage again, of course. And just being a new person, learning was very humbling because everything's new to you. You've got to figure everything out, learn everything on the job. And when you're in an industry, like I've been in food and beverage for so long, where you know your job inside out, it's humbling to go into a new industry, but it was a wonderful experience. And I would highly recommend, if you have 3 months off and you can afford to do it, definitely do it. It's worth it.
Was there anything that surprised you at either winery about the winemaking process?
The sheer intensity of labor required. Wine is way undervalued, way underpriced for sure.
Okay.
It should be, based on the amount of work that goes into it, it should be much more expensive.
Right. Absolutely.
It's a lot of work to put a wine together and a huge amount of effort and coordination with the teams in the vineyards, picking to the teams shipping and transporting the grapes to the winery. And it's a very tight schedule. The grapes can't just sit out in the open or sit out in the warehouse for ages. They've got to be pressed as soon as they come in. And it's a very logistically complex operation.
And so do you have an ideal setting where you like to enjoy a glass of wine? I'm sure you have many settings where you like to enjoy a glass of wine. What would be your ideal one?
Well, I think in a vineyard, we always have those memories of drinking wine in a vineyard, and wine never tastes so good as when you're drinking in the vineyard with somebody from the winery or with a member of the family. So when you drink that wine later on, those memories come back, olfactory memories just come back with a vengeance, don't they? So drinking in situ at the winery is probably one of the best things you can do. Otherwise, a nice rooftop bar or just with a loved one or a great friend.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, all this talk is making me thirsty, so let's taste. Let me know. You've got 2 wines there, and we'll note them in the show notes so that people can find them later. But tell us about the wines you have there.
So 2 kind of looks like random selections. One is called Natureo by Torres. It's a non-alcoholic Garnacha Syrah blend.
How interesting.
I'm working at a hotel in London now. And I'm putting together the wine list.
Yes.
And there's a lot of call for vegan wines or low alcohol and non-alcoholic wines, given the clientele you'd find in a multicultural city like London, whether it's Middle Eastern guests or Jewish guests. So we need to have a bit of everything. And Torres is such a well-known, respected brand. They do a great job with these non-alcoholic wines. So these are popular and actually taste quite good.
Really?
So that's
How
one
would you
wine.
describe the taste? Like, I would love to, I'll open what I have.
Well, typical Garnacha Syrah. Unfortunately, I'm still working today, so I
Okay,
can't crack
no
open.
worries.
Oh, actually, this one I probably could, but I don't have a glass with me, unfortunately.
That's okay.
But typical Garnacha Syrah, which is a bit earthy. It's got the pepperiness of the Syrah as well. So it's quite a nice blend, just without the alcohol, of course.
What does taking the alcohol out do to the taste, like generally? Does it make it a lighter wine in your perception? Or, I mean, if you did side-by-side kind of comparison of that wine with a wine that was the same blend but had alcohol.
Yes, it definitely does taste lighter and it feels lighter. When you finish drinking it, you just still have that light feeling afterwards as well. So it's quite nice. It's very refreshing almost. It's like just a great juice, really. But it's something you can drink in a wine glass. So if you're at a reception or at a party and you're drinking it, you don't have to feel any kind of embarrassment by not drinking alcohol. There's such a stigma and a pressure to drink alcohol in social settings. So this is a great, easy answer to avoiding that. Just have a glass of the Natureo.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do they remove the alcohol? How do they get it out?
It doesn't actually say on the label, but I would just imagine it's reverse osmosis primarily.
And what's that for those who may not be familiar with that process?
Reverse osmosis.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it's removing the alcohol.
How does that happen? Is it a spinning cone or something that I can't remember what that is?
The technical details of it, I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay.
So, great question.
Okay, cool. No worries.
I'll have to look into that.
I didn't prepare you for that one, so we'll put that in the show
That's
notes
okay.
as well.
Yeah. Well, one thing I have learned and it surprised me, when you work in a winery or write books about wine or study wine, the more you learn, the more you realize there's so much to know.
There is.
And as much as you know or think you know, there's always something more to know in terms of processes or grape varieties or just year-to-year vintage changes. So again, it's a very humbling experience, which is why I'm always amazed when I meet people in the industry who seem to know everything about wine. You think there's no way.
No.
There's just so much to know.
Never. Exactly. And before we move on to the next wine, what would you pair that wine with, the Torres Natureo?
This one, great with pastas, with lamb. So I
Okay.
wouldn't go so much anything too heavy like beef,
Right.
but with pastas and lamb, it would go quite well.
Okay, great. And you have another wine there?
Yes. So this one is called Grey Friars.
Okay.
It's a sparkling English wine.
Ooh,
And I mean, the English sparkling wine scene is really taken off this past decade or so.
yes.
The soil type, the chalk is almost identical to what you'd find in Champagne. It's just separated by the channel effectively. And I'm opening up a champagne bar at the hotel I work next quarter, Q1,
Great.
March next year.
Yep.
And it's going to be primarily a champagne bar with champagnes, of course, but we do want to have maybe some Franchiacorta and some great English sparkling wines.
Huh.
So I've got a whole bunch of sparkling wines downstairs to taste with the team. The usual suspects like Night Timber and Chapel Down, and then things like Grey Friars. So we're looking at the price, we're looking at the taste, and looking at the label to see what we want to list on these champagne list.
I'm hoping we get more English sparkling wines here in Canada. I'm sure Americans too. They're extraordinary. The
great.
ones that I've tasted, I mean, they could go head to head with champagne, yet they're usually
Absolutely,
a fraction
and
of
they
the
are.
cost or price. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're seeing more and more champagne companies from Champagne investing in Kent and Sussex and these areas because, again, the soil consistency is very similar. With climate change, it does benefit some areas like the south of England in terms of wine growing capability.
Right, exactly.
So it's not all bad.
No, it's not all bad. And I've heard they're even making wine in Scotland now due to climate change,
yeah.
which is wow.
Well, you could appreciate this. California, of course, has Napa.
Yeah.
And in Canada, we have Kelowna, we have Vancouver, and they're starting to call those areas Napa North. So eventually we'll catch up with Northern California.
Yeah, the upside, if I can put it that way, to climate change is that we'll probably have better ripened, especially the big reds every year as temperatures rise.
Absolutely. So what do you have?
I have Quail's Gate, dry Riesling from
Ooh.
BC. Love this one. It's very sprightly, zesty. It makes my mouth water. It's low in alcohol. It's not zero, of course, but it's like, I think 8 or 9%,
Okay, nice.
and would be wonderful with seafood, even shellfish,
Yeah.
whatever. It's
Well,
lovely.
if you like Mission Hill, that is just down the road from Mission Hill. I drove by Quail's Gate every day on the way to and from
Oh,
work
did you?
at Mission Hill.
Yeah, and they have a
Yeah.
great restaurant
So-
too.
They've got a beautiful restaurant,
Yeah.
a great tasting room,
Yes.
really, really good staff, and it's just a beautiful place to visit.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So, lightning round, Stephen, just some quick questions and answers.
All right, shoot.
Okay, great. So, is there something that you believe about wine with which some people would strongly disagree?
Wine pairing certainly has its place in the world, and some wines definitely go better with some foods. But at the same time, I've eaten out so many times and eaten out with so many people that if I see a great wine and a great dish, even if they might not necessarily have anything to do with each other, I'll still order them.
Right.
And you can eat and drink as you wish. You don't always have to pair everything perfectly. Now, it's difficult if you're on a date, perhaps, or if you're with your boss, because of course they'll be watching your selection. But if you're just with friends, then it's fine to have a Pinot Noir with a steak, or fine to have a Riesling with I don't know, chicken or something.
Sure.
So that's absolutely fine to mix and match as you wish. So that's something I like to do, and I do get some funny looks from people sometimes. But I want to eat and drink what I want to eat and drink, and not worry about what anybody else thinks.
Best advice I ever heard was pair the wine to the diner, not the dinner.
Yeah.
Your personal taste.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, have a bun in between.
There you go. Exactly. Yes. Cleanse the palate.
Exactly. Maybe tell us about one of your favorite childhood foods and what you might pair with it today as an adult.
Okay, I don't really know why, but one of my favorite childhood foods was lasagna. I mean, it's just rich, thick, creamy, ragu-like dish, and that goes well with almost any red wine, really. So an easy pairing for anything. And the Italian wine and food scene is just phenomenal in terms of the sheer variety of what you can eat and drink together. So the dish I would choose, lasagna.
Awesome. Any weird wine and food pairings that you've ever tried? And did it work or did it not work?
Pizza with anything.
Okay. Yes.
So, yeah. But weird wine pairings? Not necessarily, no. I can't think of anything that comes to mind, really.
Okay. Try pairing ketchup chips with wine sometime, and you'll find there's
there
some
we go.
bizarre
That might
kind
be
of
a
combinations.
bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, or maybe Pepsi and milk in the wine, maybe. That's a trend these days, right?
Yeah.
Pepsi and milk.
Oh,
So, but hopefully it won't extend to the wine world.
No, I hope it doesn't go there. That's worse than synthetic wine, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a toss-up. Have you ever gotten into trouble for drinking a particular bottle of wine?
Again, thankfully, no. Nothing comes to mind in terms of stories that way.
Good.
So it's not like my parents had an amazing cellar that I was able to rob,
raided as a
unfortunately.
child?
So no. So they were pretty traditionalist, didn't have a lot of wine in the house. So,
Yeah.
But in terms of drinking a particular wine, no, nothing in particular, no.
Have you ever dropped a
Thankfully.
bottle on the job, like broken?
I think we all have done so. I think I still have a fracture on one of my toes from doing so.
Ouch.
I had to do a lot of stock taking in my sommelier in my wine career,
Okay.
of course. So, and those stock takes would happen overnight from midnight until 6 in the morning,
Right.
and you're counting thousands of bottles of wine. And of course, after a while, you get a little tired. So, yeah, there was a memorable moment when I dropped the bottle on my toe.
Ouch. There should be workers' comp for that, I think.
It's a battle scar.
So, beyond your books, of course, what is one of your favorite wine books?
I've done a lot of research on wine books. I want to see what's out there. So I've read a lot. I've been very fortunate. Peter Stafford Bowe has written 3 novels on wine, and they're just phenomenal.
Oh, does he have a regional focus? Because I'm not sure I've read any of his.
He's English,
Okay.
and he's created a fake organization called the Minstrels of Wine to parody the Masters of Wine.
Oh, I see.
And the books are just absolutely hilarious.
Oh,
So,
I'm going to have to look
the first
him
book
up.
is called Corkscrew, if I recall.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a one main character that takes place in all 3 books.
Ah.
I love reading the historical fiction side of wine too. So books like Wine and War,
Yes.
on how wine was influenced by the wars in France. There's great books on champagne. I mean, just so many books. I mean, The Billionaire's Vinegar is another book that comes to mind.
That was great.
So if you actually do your research, there's tons of great books on wine and the history of wine. And the one I would definitely recommend, it might be a little more dry, like a good wine is, but The Botanist and the Vintner
Oh, yeah.
by Christy Campbell. The true story about phylloxera and how it came to be and how it was resolved.
Okay, great. What's the most useful wine gadget you've come across?
The Corvin, love the Corvin.
Yes,
So,
okay.
yeah. Expensive, gotta be careful with it, but it's just a great device for preserving wine and enjoying wine, whether yourself or in a restaurant or bar setting where your clients can have wine that you normally wouldn't have by the glass. So we do a Puligny Montrachet on the wine list downstairs here, and it's just fantastic.
Huh. And you've got another contraption there. You showed me before we started recording.
Yes.
What is that?
Every sommelier wine lover should have a champagne saber.
Yes. Oh, and
So
for those who are
this
just
is for-
listening, we'll put a picture of this in the show notes. But this is a serious looking, beyond a dagger size.
It's not sharp
No.
and it's not terribly pointy.
Right.
It's just got a good blunt end for opening champagne. So I did a performance yesterday for some of our sales clients, and it's just a beautiful way to open
It
champagne.
is.
There is a trick to it, though. The bottle must be a champagne bottle because it's thick. It must be cold as possible, so it's brittle and the champagne doesn't fly out.
Right.
And you've just got to be very safe when you do it.
Yes.
I've never had an accident, but if you go on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, you'll see all sorts of disasters. So just if you try it, just be very careful, do a bit of research, and make sure you do it properly.
Yeah, actually, don't try this at home. But there is a technique, of course. You have to find the seam of the glass going up the side, and you're going under the neck.
Take the foil
because
off.
You're looking for the structural weakness in the glass. So you really do have to know what you're doing. So
yes. So don't just take a butter knife and think you can do it at home after a couple of drinks.
If you could share a bottle of wine with any person outside the wine world, living or dead, who would that be, and which wine might you open?
Well, you mentioned Dan Brown. I would love to chat with him about writing, or any writer about writing, really. So just a great bottle of champagne and just chatting about writing all night with a very popular, very established author would be phenomenal. So, I mean, Stephen King would be a treat.
Yeah.
I meet a lot of celebrities and I meet a lot of royalty politicians in my career as a hotelier, but it's the writers who I meet who really excite me.
Wow. What would you ask Dan or Stephen? Was one question that would come to mind?
I mean, the eternal question of any writer, where do you get your ideas from?
Right. Yes, the idea factory.
Exactly, yes. So, we send a postcard and ideas come back to us.
Exactly.
Well, this is where I find traveling has been such a boon to my writing, because when you travel and meet so many people and are exposed to so many different cultures and places, you just generate so many ideas. And once you have those ideas in your mind, eventually they gel into story ideas or story anecdotes or even characters. I mean, I don't write about individuals I know as characters, but I'll take this quirk from one character or person I know and this quirk from another person, and then that becomes a character in a book eventually.
That's great. If you could put up a billboard in downtown Toronto, what would it say?
Drink wine, save water.
I love it. I love it. Not to be morbid again or go dark here, but which wine would you like served at your funeral, which is a long way from now?
Definitely a really, really expensive champagne. I would want everybody to enjoy my life and celebrate my life and enjoy their own life as well. I mean, champagne's one of those drinks where it's got a stigma as well. You drink it only on special occasions, but when you open a great bottle of champagne, you create an occasion.
Yes.
So I think we should be doing more of that, especially after COVID. I personally don't believe there's going to be a recession in the coming years. I think we're going to have another roaring 20s. Everybody just wants to get back out and enjoy life. And what better way to do that than cracking open a great bottle of wine with great friends.
Oh, I love your optimism. Terrific.
Perennial optimist.
That's great. We have to be. If you're a novelist, you have to be an optimist.
Yes.
What's maybe one more wine tip for our viewers or listeners, that a piece of wine advice that you like to share with people?
Well, I mean, going back to how intimidating wine can be, I think you just need to approach wine like you do. And I always like to use the anecdote of or the similarity of music. So when you listen to music, you don't have to be an expert at music. You don't have to know what the instruments are or the individual songwriters and individuals in the band. You just listen to what you enjoy. And I think wine should be very much the same. Drink what you enjoy drinking. You don't have to know everything about it, and land on what you like and stick to it. You don't have to try absolutely everything. I mean, wine is very much like music. And I say this, there's a little spiel that one of my characters has in Root Cause where he says the same thing. And I do truly believe in that. So whether you like country or house or hardcore, industrial, techno, funky, happy house, I mean, just drink what you enjoy, listen to what you enjoy, and don't worry about the rest.
Oh, fantastic, Stephen. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to mention as we wrap up?
No, and we've covered the next book, so I'm really excited about those. I do plan eventually, I've got the series lined out. I want to write 7 wine novels all together.
Okay.
The last one will be a character ensemble, so all the characters of all the books will eventually end up in the last book for one big final adventure. So that's all building up in my mind, and the storylines coming together for that.
I love that.
Once that series is done, though, then I'll turn to hotel writing. So I've worked in hotels for 25 years, just as long as I've been enjoying wine. So I want to write a series of stories and novels set in the hotel industry.
Oh,
set around
terrific.
the world.
Maybe something like White
more
Lotus?
thrillers. Maybe, yeah.
I love the drama around a hotel. But you've envisioned your whole box set here with the wine series and then the hotel series. You've got a good vision going.
I'm working on it. It's good to have a vision, so I'm working towards that. So the challenge, of course, as with anything, is just finding the time to do so. But I've just moved back to London and just thrilled to be here. I'm back in wine territory. When I first arrived, we had the Decanter Fine Wine Encounter at my hotel, where we had over 100 exhibitors, 1,000 people coming to taste wines. Last night, I was at a wine tasting with Decanter again, and we tasted a series of 10 Chateauneuf du Papes from 2009 to 2019.
Awesome.
So it's just a phenomenal experience. And London's just such a great place to be situated to learn about wine and being exposed to everything Venice.
Absolutely. And which hotel are you with right now?
I'm with the Landmark London Hotel.
Okay, perfect. We'll have to...
So it's a gorgeous hotel and great wine program here. And it's just a wonderful place to be.
We'll have to visit when you open that champagne bar. That sounds really great.
Q1, it's opening. End of March will be open. It's going to be phenomenal. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it.
That is great. Okay, so Steven, where can we find you online?
Well, my website, stevenlaine.com, is available, of course. I'm on Amazon. I'm on Goodreads, Instagram. I'm not as active on Twitter as I should be. So that's my one failing.
Oh, but that's okay.
Yeah, the usual websites, essentially. Yeah. And my website does need some updating. It's just been such a busy couple of years with working in wineries, traveling around the world. I was working in the Caribbean for a year before I came out here. So now that I'm settled, though, hopefully I can pick things back up a bit in terms of the website and getting these next books out.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on all your success, Stephen. I
thank you,
really enjoyed chatting with you today. So I'll raise my glass. You can raise a bottle. Well. Cheers.
There we go. Yes. Well, I'll enjoy a glass tonight after work.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Take care.
Cheers. Cheers.
Bye for now.
Okay. Thank you, Natalie. Have a great night.
Too.
Take care.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Steven. Here are my takeaways. Number 1, I enjoyed more nightmare scenarios from Steven this week. I can't imagine a world where there's only synthetic wine. Wine is both an art and a science, as he mentions, but it's also so natural and an extension of the earth. 2, his insights into how removing alcohol impacts the tasting experience were interesting. And 3, I have to agree with him that given the sheer labor intensity of producing wine, much of it is underpriced. In the show notes, you'll find my email contact, the full transcript of my conversation with Steven, links to his website and book, and where you can find the live stream video version of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. You'll also find a link to my free Ultimate Guide to Wine and Food Pairing, and where you can pre-order your copies of Wine Witch on Fire today, please. That's all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/224. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or would like to be an early reader of my new memoir at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. If you missed episode 19, go back and take a listen. I chat about what it took to become the world's best sommelier with Arvid Rosengren. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
The key, if you want to become a good blind taster for spirits, it's exposure, I think. You got to smell a lot. Usually the blind tasting of spirits are sort of, let's say they put down 8 glasses. My goal is to be able to nail 5 or 6 on smell alone so that I don't have to start tasting until the very end. Because once you start tasting, you start messing with your palate and everything becomes difficult. You have to nail more than half of it on the nose alone and then move to taste. Your spirits are usually so sort of defined by their category in the sense that it's pretty easy once you learn the sort of archetypes to start getting there.
And do you mean that like a tequila is always easily identifiable versus a Cabernet?
Exactly. Even if they're different, the differences are so marked, whereas the difference in wine can be very subtle. You know, sometimes you get Syrahs that taste like Malbec and that kind of thing. You don't get that with spirits. If it's a Scotch, it's very different from a bourbon. And it's always going to be very different from bourbon.
If you liked this episode, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines, tips, and stories we shared. You won't want to miss next week when I chat with sisters Sandy Dawkins and Michelle Lester, who co-host the podcast Wines to Find. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a sparkling wine that you savor. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemaclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.